Hi everyone, welcome to the Futurum Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Newman, CEO of the Futurum Group, here in beautiful Santa Clara by the Bay at Marvell's offices here. Joined by Loi today. We're going to be talking a little bit about, well, first of all, we're going to talk about AI, but that's not the only thing. We're talking about optical, we're going to talk about light, we're going to talk about some of the info that you shared here at the Industry Analyst Day. But first of all, thanks so much for joining. How are you doing today?
Good.
Yeah?
Good, excellent.
It's great to have you here. You know, first of all, I always love coming out this way. So much energy. It is December of 2023, and yet the Silicon Valley is booming, and there are announcements, it feels like every single day, and so many of them are around what's going on. Generative AI is kind of taking the year by storm, but there's so much to be done to make this work. And I had the chance to sit down with you, watch your presentation here at the event.
Oh, good.
Really appreciated you doing that. And I'm gonna hit you on all that a little bit. But you came in over the last couple of years, and excuse me, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but you know, Inphi was acquired.
2021.
April 21. I actually did a podcast with, I think you were on it with me. I was in, it was during the kind of, we were still in kind of semi-shutdown time.
Yes.
So I was like in a back of a SUV, and we were on video together recording, and I was catching up because it was such a big, a big piece of news. But we weren't traveling yet. We couldn't come into an office and sit down like this. But
exactly.
It was a huge moment, big for Marvell, big for Inphi. But give a little bit just kind of your background and tell us a little bit about what you're working on here right now at Marvell.
Okay, great. So I was co-founder of Inphi, so I started the company 20-some years ago and grew it to a leader in optical interconnect, and then, you know, COVID hit, and Marvell brought out all the wonderful, Inphi brought out all the wonderful chips that connect people and the world together. And Marvell made an offer that the Inphi board couldn't refuse. And so I joined Marvell as an executive VP, reporting to Matt Murphy, the CEO, and I'm running the optical group.
Yeah, and I did like your story, though. When you were up on stage, you were sort of talking about how when you got into the business, you were looking for a company to acquire that was doing what you ended up doing. And you said, well, we didn't really find anyone. So you that kind of was the beginning of your trajectory, was that you kind of by accident, as you were looking for a company to buy, you found that there was an opportunity that no one was really doing what you saw as the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, that was like 2010 to 2012. My dream was to build an optical integrated circuit that could integrate hundreds and thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of components that will process light the way integrated circuit doing with electrons today. Yeah. But at the time, there were 3 or 4 startups, but they were all struggling and they didn't really have a lot of technology. So I decided I'm going to go and build it myself. And of course, not by myself, right? Yeah. I had to go and find a team, build a team, but adding one by one and build the team into a really world-class team in silicon photonics.
Hey, even Woz had a team, you know. Nobody does it all. Nobody does it all by themselves. I mean, you know, some people know how to handle a soldering iron, but there's a little bit more to it than that. But well, you know, congratulations on the rocket ship growth. It's always a great indicator that you were right when, you know, the bigger company knocks on your door. You know, we spent all the time here today talking about it was almost all about AI, all about accelerated computing. You focused a lot on the business and the optics business, but just kind of how do you generally, like accelerated computing and big GPUs, that's been the story of the year. Everyone's talking about that, but there's a lot more that's required to do what's going to need to be done with AI. Talk a little bit about what else that the industry should be focusing on besides just the compute.
Oh, absolutely, because, you know, as in the presentation, both Raghib and I discussed, and Noam too, that generative AI model size has gotten so big now, 10x a year over the last 10 years. And so today, to train a model like GPT-3, no single computer or AI server can actually handle the workload. Even with 1,000 GPUs, it still takes more than a month to train one single GPT-3 model. So that is why there's a race to go and build the larger and larger AI clusters to really reduce the training time to something very manageable. And to do that, it's really the connectivity is what allow the different clusters, thousands of servers can be connected together. And in fact, today, in the largest AI clusters that have thousands or 10,000s of these GPUs, the performance of the connectivity of the network, or the bandwidth, the latency, actually that determines in a large part the performance of the whole cluster. So the pillar of AI is compute and connectivity.
So we hear the term cluster a lot in the industry, and it's kind of thrown around sometimes. I don't fully think people appreciate, but like, what goes into that? Like, what goes into making one of these big clusters, and kind of like, especially in regards to the stuff you're working on?
Right. So a cluster is just a collection of servers.
Yep.
A server could have 8 GPU, could have 10 GPU,
But you're not talking hundreds or thousands
right,
at this
point. Exactly. So a cluster are a way to connect the different server, different GPU together to make them behave as a single super computer, data center class computer that do some certain thing in tandem. So each of the server has one chunk of the workload. They do a lot of competition, and then they have to wait, and they exchange data, and they do a little bit more, and they stop, they exchange data. And so that is why the performance of the network, the connectivity, the bandwidth, the latency determine the performance of the overall. Because servers, GPU, they need the data from other GPU.
Yep.
So inside the clusters today, there are 1,000 AI servers, tens of thousands of GPUs, thousands of switches to connect them, tens of thousands of active cables, and the cable could be electrical active cable, or could be optical active cable for the shorter reach interconnect. And then as the AI cluster get bigger and bigger and bigger to occupy the whole data center, for the longer reach, over say 5 meters today, then you need to totally go with optics.
Yep.
And so there will be tens of thousands of optics. And these clusters being built today, basically the next target is to get to 100 exaflops of computing power that need 100 petabits per second of bandwidth to connect all of them. And this cluster will probably consume somewhere around 100 megawatts.
Yeah. Well, when you break it down into, like, say a server with 2 GPUs, you can kind of say, okay, the 2 GPUs need to talk, and then you create another server that has 2, and then the 2 have to talk, and then the 2 have to talk, and then you got to connect the
Yes.
And I don't think people can always visualize, but now when you start to get into thousands,
Yes.
what I'm saying is it's usually a mix of electrical, of optical.
Yes.
And it scales very quickly, but it was a really nice explanation you gave about kind of how they're doing a little bit of work, and then they stop, and then, because it's not a real stop. The goal is to make that period in which they stop almost as close to zero, right? Removing all the latency out.
That's exactly right.
You're talking milliseconds, and you want fractions, and so and so that's been possible, especially with large clusters with big distance. The only way that becomes possible is you got to move at the speed of light. And so. Talk a little bit about how much optical has changed, because it's become very commercially viable in many cases where it wasn't a decade ago.
Absolutely.
Over the past 10 years.
Absolutely. So in terms of optical communication has been really the backbone first of the data center and the cloud computing, and now moving to AI. So today, anything more than a few meters, more than half the size of this room, you need optics, because the bandwidth is going so fast, you need to travel at the speed of light. Only fiber can have the bandwidth to do that. So the bandwidth of optical, especially things like in optical pluggables optics, which is the dominant form factor today, has grown about 40 times over the past 10 years. So 10 years ago, people were excited when they get 40 gigabit in a pluggable optics. Today it's 1.6 terabits per second. So 40x increase in 10 years. And the industry has done a pretty decent job in terms of keeping the power consumption not scaling as much as with bandwidth. So the power consumption has grown only a factor of 8 times during the 10 years time span, while the bandwidth gone up 40x. But nevertheless, because with AI, a lot more bandwidth needs to be used, the power of connectivity is also becoming important, because when I talked about a cluster size of 10,000 of GPU and consuming 100 megawatt of power, the power that you need for connectivity, meaning for the optics and the switches, is about 12%, which is quite substantial.
So one of the things I talk quite a bit about is, we're sort of seeing this really high linear growth rate for training.
Yes.
And there's a lot of focus on that right now. But the real application, the killer app, when you talk about like GPT, is inference. The killer app that everybody's consuming day in and day out is, hey, I'm using natural language talking to this thing. And so, inference is something that is going to require more infrastructure too. So right now when we talk all about because we talk a lot about training, because we talk kind of the whole example you gave, it's training.
Yes.
We will use cloud optimized silicon to do inference.
Yes.
We will use, there will be FPGAs will do inference. You'll be doing inference on, general purpose compute. And we're seeing lots of different variants, but how do we see the infrastructure and the accelerated infrastructure shift in the era when inference growth becomes more and more important?
Oh, that's a really good question. So when you talk about the training itself, so let's just say one hyperscale provider, they need to train X number of models. They may need X number of training clusters, but those are maybe 10, I don't know, maybe 10, maybe 100. But when you talk about inference, now you are talking about not even thousands, but you need to talk about tens of thousands or even more number of inference machines. And inference machine will come in all kind of different sizes, different workload. There are inferences that process natural language that still require a lot of computing power, but there are inferences that can just say, distinguish between a dog and a cat. That doesn't require much power, can be on your phone. You can have your phone and you take a picture of, what's kind of this plant, what is it? It will tell you what plant it is. That is a much smaller inference machine. But nevertheless, the way the inference to work is that inference is sensitive to end-to-end latency between the users and the machine.
Yep.
When you ask them to do something, or you're talking to them, the inference machine needs to start processing while you're talking, so that they can anticipate what your next word is going to be, so that they can start preparing the answer, whatever that is. So latency is critical. So inference will drive the infrastructure much wider globally. So you think about inference machine need to be deployed globally to the local market, to have different inference machine to do different things.
That's right. We're hearing about an era of a new kind of personal computing, new AI PCs, because that'll be about being able to do more inference locally, right? That token. We've all seen with the new, some of the different models. Some would be writing as you were talking to it, and be starting to answer. Others would wait, and you'd see it spinning. And we're not very patient people.
Yes,
I mean, we're like, I want an answer now. Like, I don't want to wait 10 seconds. And so the idea is, right, you got to bring the compute close.
Yes.
You got to have the compute in the kind of, in the edge, in the regional, and the core data center. And you got to optically, connect all of these things in order to make that, because what we want is a completely ubiquitous experience. We want it to be like I'm talking to you.
Absolutely.
You're going to react just as quickly.
I'm not smart enough to have, a
trillion
models.
A trillion parameter with Loi. So look, I've got just a couple of minutes left, but I would love to spend the end of this conversation on silicon photonics and the need for silicon photonics.
Absolutely.
Marvell's sort of story, and how important do you see that as part of Marvell's future?
I think with AI, as we just talked about, optics is the key part to connect different machines together, whether it's training or inference or whatever, right? Bandwidth demands continue to rise, even more so with AI, and silicon photonics is the technology that can scale, because it is fundamentally an integrated circuit technology, optic but still integrated. Compared to the traditional optics today, which is the discrete laser, you have to do chip and wire. It's pretty hard to continue to scale forever. The industry has done a good job in scaling bandwidth 40x over the past 10 years, but I think it will be hard to scale another 40x in the next 5 years. The pace of innovation will accelerate. You need integrated optics technology, and it's not what silicon photonics brings to the table. And so I've been working with silicon photonics for 10 years, and I'm really happy to see that now there's a catalyst to really driving it, to integrate to for more basically terabits class of bandwidth on a single chip. And I think it will play a very important part of Marvell toolbox going forward. Today, the silicon photonics already creating a class of products for Marvell to create, very high performance, pluggable optics connecting data center to data center together. AI will be the next wave or an emerging application for silicon photonics. So I'm really, really happy to see that.
Yeah, Loi, I don't know if there's been a forcing function for technology innovation that's ever come on the way AI has come on in such a short period of time. Having said that, I always say in this part of the world, we're here in the Silicon Valley talking, there's nothing better than, sort of when the entire industry as a whole finds that next pot of gold and starts running towards it, because the innovation is just overwhelming and it changes people's lives. It doesn't just change them here, it changes them everywhere in the world. And thank you, Loi, for your contributions. Appreciate you sitting down with me today.
Thank you very much for talking to me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone, hit that subscribe button. Join us for all of our episodes here on the Futurum Tech Podcast. We're here at Marvell by the Bay in Santa Clara. Industry Analyst Day, getting all the inside scoop on where we are heading, generative AI, accelerated computing, and infrastructure, and so much more. For this episode, though, it's time to say goodbye. See you all really soon.